What's up, Jackalopes? Welcome to my channel. I'm Hope, and today I want to talk about the books that I read in February. So in February, I managed to read 3 books, which was half of my TBR for the month, which is about what I'm averaging right now. It's harder than I thought to read as much as I'd like while I'm studying for the GRE, but I am really trying. So I feel like I did pretty good this month though, and it was a really good reading month for me in terms of reading books that I really liked. So jumping right in, the first book that I read was Mossflower by Brian Jacques, which is the second book in the Redwall series, part of my Redwall reread project that I'm doing, which, quick side note, I've decided to extend my Redwall reread project. It'll probably run until sometime in 2021, but what I found is that 2 Redwall books a month is just a little bit too much Redwall. I find myself getting names confused and kind of mixing up not so much the plot points, but some of the ideas in the different books. I'm on the 3rd one right now. I'm like halfway through the 3rd one at the moment, which is Madame Mayo. But even just having read Redwall and then Mossflower kind of back to back, I found myself mixing up a lot of names and getting confused while I was talking about them. So I've just decided that I'm going to extend the project a little bit. So if you're interested in seeing all of that, my first kind of quarterly review that I have planned will be up either end of this month or beginning of next, probably the beginning of next, because I have some other things planned for this month that you should keep an eye out for. But I realized that in those quarterly reviews, it's going to be more reasonable too to talk about 3 to 4 books rather than 6 to 8 books, which would have been the case if I was reading the planned 2 per month. So yeah, that's going to be extended. I'll be reading one of these per month, and this is one that I finished in February. I really enjoyed this. I felt like it still held up really well, despite the fact that the last time I read it and enjoyed it, I was like, 8, probably. It was in elementary school. But this particular book, I think, worked even better for me than the first book. The first book has more of a nostalgia thing in it for me because that was obviously my introduction to the series. But this one, I think the characters are stronger. For example, in the first book, the main character, Matthias, turns out to be the warrior protector of Redwall. That's not, I think, spoilers. It's basically the premise of the entire book. But he has never picked up a sword before in his life because he's been raised in a peaceful environment. But he's immediately good at strategy and at swinging a sword, which is kind of vaguely explained with some kind of almost magical elements. There's not out-and-out magic in this series, but there are some magical elements, which I will talk about more in my review. But in this book, the protagonist is Martin the Warrior, who is already called Martin the Warrior at this point. He's grown up fighting rats, and so it makes much more sense when he shows up and is good with a sword and is able to hold his own in a fight against the forces of Sarmina the Wildcat. So I feel like characters and their backstories are done a little bit better in Mossflower. Also, it's got a slightly different structure than Redwall that I think I enjoyed more, where rather than it being somebody coming in and trying to invade, which is a recurring theme in the Redwall series, instead it's Martin coming into a situation where there's already a tyrannical ruler and he's trying to free Mossflower Woods from that tyrannical ruler. And I think that structure just worked a little bit better for me, probably because I know that the whole invader thing is very much a theme in a lot of the Redwall books. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. This held up pretty well for me. I gave it 4 stars, and I think it's a really solid fantasy book. The second book that I read in February was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I absolutely love mysteries, and Agatha Christie is one of my favorite authors. It surprised me in a couple of ways, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it, my page is escaping me. I gave this 4 stars as well. And I did really enjoy it up until the last, 15 pages. I love everything until I get to the solution. And I know this is one of her most beloved works, and I think it's also her best-selling work. and I know it's quite popular, so I was really surprised that I didn't love the ending of this book, but to me it feels like it sets up a puzzle that it doesn't ever expect you to solve. It doesn't give you the ability to solve it. When I read mysteries, I appreciate when a mystery can give me the puzzle pieces and still keep me guessing. I think that's like the best crafted mysteries tend to have that, where you could put the puzzle together, but it's written in just such a way that you can't or you don't, and so it still surprises you. And I felt like this was setting me up for that. The mystery throughout the book I thought was absolutely brilliant. I loved all of the characters. I love that there isn't ever a character that you feel like you can 100% root for. They all are flawed and they're very human, and I absolutely loved that. But I felt like the ending cheapened it a little bit for me, because there is some information that is revealed at the very end when the solution is given that basically makes it where you could never have guessed the solution. You could never have figured it out for yourself, because those puzzle pieces aren't given to you until the very end. And I think that can work, but to me this just didn't work in this particular book. However, I still really enjoyed it, and I still think it's an absolutely fantastic book, and I totally understand why people love it. It's just not my personal favorite of her books. The last book that I read in February was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, and this one surprised me as well, but it was more of a pleasant surprise. I'm not typically a young adult reader. I haven't found very many young adult books that I actually enjoy. And I think that's just that I've always... Yeah, I don't know why. I just never really read young adult. What I have read has just not really wowed me in any way. But this one I became interested in after a friend of mine, while I was talking to her, I mentioned this book. And she said, oh yeah, I read that. It's really good. And she's really into linguistics. So she got really excited and told me that also the magic system is based on like linguistics and on language. And I just thought that sounded super interesting. So more than anything else, that's what made me pick this book up. And I'm so glad I did, because everything else was so worth it. I thought that this book had a lot like And Then There Were None, had just some fantastic characters that were really well developed, and they felt really human to me, where I don't feel like I'm reading an archetype. I feel like I'm reading about a person, like a real person. And I think part of that is because of the way the book is written in multiple perspectives, getting all of the different characters' ideas about different things, where you're getting Simon's perspective on a situation, but you're also getting Baz's, and you're also getting Penny's, and you're also getting Agatha's. And I think that both made the situations seem more believable somehow, because they all had different opinions on things, but also it made each of the characters seem more human and believable, because they all had these different opinions that were tied into their backstories and tied into their origins, and I just thought that was really cool. I loved the way this book was written, and I loved that this was really character driven, because I know I read some reviews before I picked it up that people didn't like it because they said that nothing happens, but I went in kind of with the expectation that it was going to be character driven, because that was also something I had heard, and for me this totally delivered on that. It was very character driven, and I see why people say that not much happens, because so much of the story is just people in rooms talking to each other, trying to figure things out. But for me that really worked, because the characters were so well written. And also I did really like the mystery that is set up in this, because I kind of put the pieces together on my own, but knowing the answer and knowing how that answer is going to play out are totally different things. So even though I kind of figured out what had happened early on, it was still really enjoyable for me to watch the characters try to figure it out for themselves. So I absolutely love this, and also the relationship in it is super cute, so that's just a little cherry on top. But yeah, this book totally surprised me in a great way. Absolutely loved it. In fact, I was so excited about it, I went out and bought Wayward Son, which is now way back here on my terrible chosen ones shelf, because this is not the only set of books I've read with a terrible chosen one type character, but absolutely loved it. So glad I picked it up. I gave it 5 stars, and I think on reflection it still deserves that 5 stars for me. So yeah, totally glad I picked this up. That is all of the books that I read in February. I'm hoping to read a few more in March, especially with the 2 readathons that I'm participating in. I think I can do it because I did try to pick some shorter books for those readathons, so at the very least I should be able to read like 3 or 4 of those shorter ones. Plus I have a little bit of time. I'm recording on the 6th. I think this is probably going to go up this weekend, but I have the next couple of days to read some more of Madameo and The Butchering Art by Lindsay Fitzharris, which is the other book I'm currently reading, and then I will probably have some time at the end of the month once these 2 readathons end to try and finish those up, plus whatever I'm still in the middle of after the readathons. If you've got any comments or any other recommendations, please put them in the comments. I would love to read what you guys think, and I hope to see you in the next video. So, thanks for watching. Bye.